Here we are back for another episode at RSA. I am super excited to be joined by Sounil from Knostic here. If you've been on the podcast much before, you probably recognise Sounil from talking around the cyber defence matrix and a few other things as well. But it's great to obviously be in person, finally doing one face-to-face instead of virtually. It's an exciting week ahead of us. Obviously, in the midst of RSA, the sun is shining. It's a very busy week. How are you feeling about the conference so far?
I'm in San Francisco, and I hear there's a conference going on, but I haven't actually had a chance to go and visit it because it's been busy with a lot of meetings and such. RSA has become much more about the side events, and less so about the conference itself. But of course, the conference itself has tons of great content. I'm going to have a chance to speak a couple times there. But I think actually, funny thing is, we actually held a conference, Knostic held a conference called Unprompted earlier this month in March. And it vastly exceeded our expectations. We started with a cap of 200 people. We had to expand the space, and we accepted 700 people on site. But then we also had 800 people online. And they enjoyed the conference with a whole different experience than even the on-site ones. But what we learned, the content itself was amazing, but there were a couple things I thought was really fascinating. First is, what would an AI-enabled conference look like? So Unprompted was an AI conference, AI security conference, but we also used AI itself to figure out how do we make this experience something that is like next level, if you will.
Yeah.
And so we had Rob Lee from SANS. There's a couple of Rob Lees, but this one particular Rob Lee from SANS, he took the transcripts and the slides and threw it into Google's Notebook LM. And then we ended up with this one interface where you could ask questions about the presentations in a single interface.
Oh, wow.
And so now imagine if you could do that for all the RSA presentations. It's like, it really changes the dynamic of how you want to think about how conferences are run. And again, we did this for Unprompted. We had the online version had its own sort of vibe. And actually, for being on site, we had FOMO for not being able to join the online one. Anyway, so that was just the structure of the conference, but then the actual content of the conference was just top notch.
Yeah.
We had amazing speakers from all sorts of places, Google DeepMind, Anthropic, OpenAI. But of all the presentations, the one that was my favorite was Dan Guido's from Trail of Bits, and he talked about what an AI native company looks like.
Yeah.
And I would say, coming into the conference, my definition of an AI native is actually like one or two steps down from what he considers to be AI native.
Yeah.
And so it casts a new vision of what a much more aggressive sort of view of that looks like. But what I really liked about Dan's presentation is that he runs a consulting shop, a really high-tier consulting shop with a lot of experts. And of course, these experts are concerned about AI replacing them as well.
Yeah.
And so he provided a career path for these experts to become really, again, AI native, not just as the company, but AI native in terms of how these consultants use these tools to expand their ability to deliver consulting services. Again, a very people-heavy function, which is potentially easily displaceable by AI, yet he has this really insightful strategy about how to enable AI, to enable consultants to become not just the user of a tool, but rather to be in charge of creating the workflows and the processes and to orchestrate a number of things, something that only a human can really do, using all these tools at your disposal. And so I thought that even though he was framing it in the context of his business, it provided a lot of really great nuggets that any company can use to understand what is AI native and how do you do this in a way that empowers your people and not just displaces them.
And it's really interesting, you unpack a couple of really cool bits there. And firstly, obviously, congratulations on such a successful conference, because I think especially one thing that we really see, the likes of RSA, Black Hat, they are phenomenal conferences. Everybody's in the same kind of location, and it's a great opportunity to do that. But they're very overwhelming, and you can't make it to everything. You mentioned at the start, the conference floor, it's almost impossible to get onto. I was literally just walking past the Moscone Centre then, and I was thinking that line goes all the way around the block just to get in the door. And it can feel really overwhelming to then not be able to make it to the talks, and then you want to maybe go to the startups on kind of the higher floors where you're getting to see or get access to those earlier stages. Whereas sometimes maybe some of these ones that are really specific and stripped back, you can get even more value, and then having that accessibility piece for remote individuals, RSA would be pretty much impossible to do remotely. Like it's a real challenge to do. What is it that prompted you guys to drive that, or at least be like, hey, this is why we think this could be really interesting? Because I imagine there's something that prompted it, and therefore why it was so successful.
Yeah, so it actually started off with a series that my co-founder launched called Prompt or GTFO.
Yeah.
And the basic premise was, look, we're all experimenting with the usage of these amazing tools. Let's just spend 5 minutes, each person who's invited, just explaining what you've done with the tool. And if the people who are listening want you to continue, then they'll give you more time. They'll vote on giving you more time. So you start with 5 minutes. So you got to get it done in 5 minutes. And if you can't show what's interesting in less than that, then you lose your 5 minutes and you move on to the next person. For those who provide a compelling sort of use case, they get more time. And what we discovered was there's just a wide range of different use cases that people are putting forth, many very clever ways that we hadn't considered. Anyway, so out of that grew a desire to formalize this and to see what else people had to say about it. And so we assembled a review board that was pretty notable in terms of the review board itself. The review board then drew more people to want to present at the conference. And it just created a virtuous loop that resulted in, again, some really top-tier speakers, and the makeup of the audience was over the top as well. Because we had very senior people from across the industry, but also people who've been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
And so people felt like it was almost like a reunion, but surrounded around the topic of AI and security, which, because it's moving so fast, even if you've been in this space for a long time, there's so much more to learn from one another. And so the opportunity to gather people in the same time, the same room, in a much more cozier spot, so to speak, it just created the right elements to make for a successful conference.
Yeah.
In relation to RSA, and also the conference, even though Knostic sponsored it, we were very low-key in terms of, we weren't pushing products or anything vendor. There's very little vendor pitching, if at all.
Yeah.
In fact, there was one vendor pitch, and it was from OpenAI, but it was roundly like booed.
Yes.
But the perspective at the end of the day was make it very practitioner heavy and focused. And I think one of the challenges that we see right now with RSA is that the general sentiment from the people who've been here for a while is that it's gotten very vendor-centric.
Yeah.
Part of it's because the organizers have to make money.
Yes.
Whereas for us, we were just trying to break even and make sure that people had a good time.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and there's place for both as well, but ultimately I think especially as a security practitioner, you don't always want to get salty because that's such an overwhelming thing, but getting knowledge and insight and recognizing is almost like that educational piece as well, which is important. But the other thing I wanted to unpack is you talk about, when you were referencing around like the native AI and stuff, I find it really interesting because obviously last RSA, it was almost like a running joke that all the booths had the same 2-3 words on, and it's because everybody was saying AI. Obviously, the running joke was also being, well, actually what they mean is they've just got an autonomous system or whatever it may be. They're actually not a native AI or whatever they might be talking about. And I think we're starting to recognize now that people really want to see the actual quality of, you say you're this AI product, but like we need to see it, and it's no longer just a buzzword that everybody thinks, oh great, you actually have it implemented. But having a conference around that and seeing, and obviously like you mentioned, you've got a really great example there of how I think there's this fear that a lot of people have a fear of AI as much as they recognize the value of it, because there is this, I don't want it to replace me. But ultimately the entire core reason why people were really driving that innovation was because they wanted to accelerate or enhance what humans could, take away the autonomous tasks. And then obviously now it's the agentic generative where people are, what are some of the key takeaways or some of the key discussions, other than what you talked about there with that consulting arm, that you think were really like hot topics, or anything that is probably going to be like a rolling conversation as we move in? Because I imagine what we'll probably hear about a lot this week is pretty much people talking about the movement between last year, this year, and where we anticipate it going.
So there are a couple of key themes that I think emerged. One is vulnerability discovery is being done at a scale and efficacy that is going to really change how we think about how we look at vulnerabilities altogether. So there's a lot of companies out there that are making a lot of money based on either the discovery of vulnerabilities or the patching of vulnerabilities or just the management process altogether. I remember Google provided this perspective of, what if in 6 months to a year, we've put in the right harnesses and scaffolding around these coding agents that they avoid 99.9% of the known common weaknesses that are oftentimes introduced in code. So you've essentially factored most of that out of the equation, such that the amount of vulnerabilities are now quite shallow, where in the past they were quite dense. That was an interesting mindset echoed throughout the conference, where if we try to go with the old way of doing things, we're just going to we will have so many vulnerabilities that even with additional machine help, there's no way that we can ever catch up. So it's just exacerbating a problem at a scale that we would have no hope of fixing. So we have to really rethink the whole process to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing as a major theme was, I hinted at it just a moment ago, there's the vulnerabilities, but then you have the coding agents.
Yeah.
And the rise of the coding agent, or the use of coding agents to satisfy not just traditional developer type of use cases, but also things like finance and sales and marketing and all these other use cases. That's taken off on its own sort of direction as well. And so the use of coding agents for addressing a lot of business functions, that growth or the use of this across all these different domains, it was another thing that's interesting. I think the best manifestation of that particular phenomenon, though, is OpenClaw.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And OpenClaw has really taken the world by storm since the end of January. And from the conference, there was a related takeaway I had, which is everything we know now about AI may become very fast irrelevant in 2 months. Okay. OpenClaw, as of this recording, is less than 2 months old. It's been around since November or December timeframe, but it really entered the zeitgeist at the end of January.
Yeah.
But in the last 2 months, the entire ecosystem around OpenClaw has really emerged only in the last 2 months, and what people are doing with it and all the use cases is less than 2 months old. And yet it is driving this massive amount of interest and energy, even inside enterprises where security teams are scared to death about it because it was built not very securely initially, yet there are so many use cases that people find out of it. So what I learned from the Unprompted conference is even if you feel like you're really far ahead of everyone else, you're actually only 2 months ahead.
Yeah.
Okay? And similarly, if you feel like you're behind, you're only 2 months behind.
Yeah.
And it's both scary, but it's also encouraging to know that you can actually catch up. You just got to put some dedicated time into experimenting and playing with these. The opportunity is there. It's just a matter of who's willing to take it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really exciting about, especially when we're looking at this part of the market, is it's that almost the risk-taking mentality. If you're willing to fail and get creative with some of this tech, it's what will allow you to do something like OpenClaw. But also the fact that, like you say, if you do feel like you're behind, if you're willing to have a bit of a play around and really go for it, you can very quickly catch up. And like you say, I think it's a really intimidating thing in the market, knowing how quickly and rapidly it's evolving. But ultimately, it creates so much opportunity as that continues to develop, to the point where arguably we don't now need to do 6, 12-month intervals to be like, let's reflect on how things, it can literally be a couple of weeks and something's changed pretty significantly in the space. And that's equally as exciting, and it's probably quite convenient why cyber is the industry that's got about 3,000 conferences and events, because at least now we're at the point where enough is changing that there's enough to talk about that's evolved since the last event. But no, I think really exciting times. Is there anything that you're anticipating coming out of this week? Anything that you're thinking, I'm really excited to hear about these things specifically, that this is going to be almost the time at RSA. Everybody likes to announce things this time of year. This is when we're getting all the product launches. Everybody's coming out stealth. But anything in particular that you've got your ear to the ground for?
Unfortunately, no. I don't think I'm at the point of actually anticipating something, like I'm actually looking for something. I don't think I would say I'm looking for this.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to be surprised. And I think I come here to be surprised by someone who comes and says, I've started to do this, or our organization is doing that. And whoa, mind blown in terms of what you could potentially do. I think the Unprompted conference gave us just a higher density of that.
Yes.
Because it was geared towards that sort of surprise.
Yes, yeah.
And people left both astonished, surprised, but also hopeful because there was a path towards, okay, I can see us doing that. With RSA, it's going to be a little harder to find that denser concentration of that type of content. But it will happen if you're in the right place with the right audience, which may not be as easy to. Some of these are very invite-only type of things.
So much going on as well. It's a lot of noise to break through.
I think there's a reason why people come to San Francisco this week, and it is because the collision of ideas, the discovery or the exploration of the adjacent possible happens because you bring people in a close proximity and the opportunity to have those conversations across the course of a week, as exhausting as this week can be, it is something that I think we all look forward to because we know that there's a lot of value that comes from those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's why it's important to get here, even though it's an exhausting, full-on week. And also, it's just nice to have everybody in the same spot and say hello to familiar faces and get to see in person. Thank you for joining me here today. It's been great to hear a little bit more about the conference, what you guys have been up to, what we're seeing in the space. And as we probably will do, we'll follow up again in a few months' time and we'll see where things are. I'm sure the conversation will continue to evolve.
Yeah, and the world will have changed by then.
Absolutely will have. But it's been a pleasure, and to everybody tuning in, thank you for spending your time. Continue following the conversations we have while here at RSA this week. But that's it for today, so join us next time for more conversations that are shaping cyber.